Guys, this is Joel, and we'll be looking into another interesting concept of ASAs. I would call that as clustering, right? Um, and we are going to do this on GNS3, so that's going to be super fun. All right. So clustering. What do we do in the clustering, right? So in the earlier videos, I think you have already seen some of the high availability features of ASA, where we did active standby, we did active kind of configuration, right? But some of the limitations of these configuration was that we can use only two boxes at a given time, right? So we are gonna get around this limitation by using clustering. The other thing is that we were basically doing something like load sharing up there, but using clustering we are gonna actually evolve from load sharing into what you call as a load balancing, right? So we'll see how we get around that. So we are going to look at two different configurations. Maybe we will cover both of them in the same video, or maybe we will do the other one in the next video. So let's start with the first one. The first one is called as so there are two different modes of clusters, right? um, One is basically the span mode and the other one is the individual interface mode, right? So in clustering, the idea is that two or more number of ASAs, we are basically clubbing it together, right? And again, you are going to have the similar kind of a setup where one is going to be the master and the rest of them are going to be the slaves, right? But two or more number of ASAs are going to be put together, and you know and we are going to achieve load balancing using different mechanisms. So like in the first one, in the span mode, we're going to use port channels to achieve this load balancing, right? So we're going to have port channels here. So if you look at the configuration here, we have ASA1, ASA2, right? And you have R1 and R2 as the routers. This is my inside and this is R2 is my outside. And what you can see here is that I have done port channeling over here, right? So we have constructed port channels on both the inside and the outside, right? And we are basically kind of like using the benefits of port channel, right? Port channel basically balances, does load balancing, right, the traffic. So we are extracting, or we are basically using the advantages of using a port channel in a ASA environment. And that feature and that mode where you use it, it's called as the span mode, right? In the other one, where is the individual interface mode, we are basically going to use, we are not going to use port channels. We are going to use the benefits of what you call as equal cost paths, in a routing environment, right? We will see this later. So let's start with the span mode, right? So let's start with constructing my basic topology, right? So this is going to be my logical topology, and this is my physical topology here, which I put up in a GNS3. I have two routers, 1, 2, and the same ASAs 1 and 2, and I'm gonna have a switch to which connects all of them, right? Now, how do I convert this physical topology into this logical topology? We're gonna use VLANs for that, right? Looks good. Okay. So how do we go about this? So let's start where from down, probably. Let's start from down. Yeah. So let's start by configuring my switch, which means all of these devices, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the 4 devices are basically connected to my switch, right? And in order to convert this topology into something like this, we are going to use VLANs. So my first step would be to configure the interface of R1, which is connected to a switch. We're going to put it in this VLAN 10. Then we will create a port channel here, right? We are going to do everything on the switch first, and then we will go and do it on the ASIs. So on the switch side, we will have to first configure the interface of R1, configure these two interfaces, and connect it or put it in a port channel. Do the same thing on the other side as well, right? Then we will go and do the configuration for ASA. So let's start with the switch configuration. Let me put it as switch. Like I said, the R1, right? So where is R1? This is R1, and the side of the switch is gigabit 1/1, right? So this is the interface which we are going to put in VLAN 10, because that is VLAN 10, right? So let's put that. Here you go. That is done. So we have put it in VLAN 10, right? That's what we wanted. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to do the port channeling part. So it's going to be the gigabit 1 interface of ASAs, both the ASAs, right? So if you look at here, this is the I mean, I would say um, don't go with the terminology, right? Yeah. So it's either Ethernet or gigabit. So for now, let's just assume this is gigabit actually. Yeah. So I have used gigabit over here, but actually on my ASS it is Ethernet, right? Shouldn't matter. Shouldn't be a big difference. Anyway, so we have done VLAN 10 for now. We have configured this interface. The next is we're going to configure these two interfaces. So which are those interfaces on the switch? It's gigabit 0/2 and 0/3, right? So we have to put that in the VLAN 10 as well. So let's do that. So we have put both of them in VLAN 10, right? Because that's the VLAN over here on the inside. And let's also put switch port no negotiate, otherwise we might get all this DTP related trunking errors, right? I think you can read about dynamic trunking protocol to understand this command, right? So now next is, because we are intending to build a port channel, we need to use the port channel command, which is channel group. Put in a number, my bad, not this. So yeah, it's going to be channel group 10 and mode and active, right? So that should do. Now what we did, we completed everything at the bottom. We have to replicate the same thing at the top, right? Oh, okay, we did not actually create the port channel yet, so let's do that. So that's one more step actually. So we bundle these two interfaces into a port channel, and this is where the port channel is going to be defined, right? Looks good. So we're going to do the same 3 steps down as well, right? Yeah, I think, all right, let's also do a now shut of the interfaces and port channel, because that's important as well. Okay, so these are the interfaces. I'm just going to do no shut here, and the port channel as well, which is no shut. All right, so we're going to repeat the same steps, but on the top as well, which is here between R2 and these interfaces. So on R2 you see the switch interface which it is connected to is gigabit 1/2. So we're going to do that. There you go, that is done. The next would be port channeling, right? So we need to use the interfaces 1/0 and 1/3, because that is connected to my ASA on the top, right? These two interfaces of the switch. So we're going to do that, right? So we're going to put the channel group as 20 here. The VLAN is going to be 20, because on the top it is 20 and the bottom it is 10. All right, repeat the same steps like earlier. We're going to we're going to create the port channel, put the VLAN in that, and we're going to do a no shut of the interfaces and port channel. Looks good. So all of that happened on the switch. What did we leave? Okay, so there is one more interface, which is gigabit 0/0 and 0/1, which we have not used. So that will basically be my cluster link. So if you see here, there's a small link in between these two ASAs, which is useful for all your stateful communication, and also kind of like the heartbeat between the ASAs, right? So that is basically used for that. So I'm going to configure that and put that in a same VLAN, right? So let's do that. There you go. So that was my bad, not this. I thought I had copied it. My bad. All right, so this is the cluster link, right? So the cluster link is basically the two interfaces. I'm going to put that in VLAN 100. So I think we are good with my switch, right? Looks good. Let's just put this on my switch and see how it works out. Let's take this. Let's go to my switch. Let me clear the screen a bit. Let me clear the screen a bit. This looks a little odd. Right, so let's put this and there you go. That's going to be my configuration, which I have dumped. All right, looks good. So we have done everything on the switch. Moving on, what do we do next? Let's quickly wrap up the routers as well. R1 and R2 shouldn't be difficult, right? So on my R1, what do? I'm going to put in an IP address here, probably enable telnet on it, right? And I will also create a default route towards my ASA, right? Towards the ASA, which will be basically configured later. So I'm going to do that. So let's go to R1. Let's put R1 here and explain it to you guys what I did actually. So this is all pretty much straightforward. The host name, the Ethernet interface, I'm going to put an IP address of 10.11.11.1 because that is the network here. 10.11.11.0 VLAN 10. I'm going to use .1, and also the telnet part, and the last part is my default route, which is towards ASA, right, which I will configure later. Let's also do R2. Pretty much the same. Everything is same. Only the IP addresses will be different, right? So this is my R2. The IP address is going to be different here. It's going to be 192.1.20.2 because that is my network at the top, and the rest all looks good, right? Let's probably quickly take this and put it up as well. So let's go to my R1. Let's clear the screen. Okay, there you go. So we've done on R1. Let's do it on R2 as well. Okay, looks good. So we have done R1 and R2. What else is remaining? Okay, so we are down to my ASA now, right? So we have to configure our ASAs. So let me remind you, we are doing clustering. We are trying to group these both ASAs together, or we are going to combine it together so that we can use the powers of both of them and do something called load balancing, right? So to do cluster configuration, you need to do certain bootstrap configuration on both my ASAs. So which means ASA1 and ASA2, we are going to do some basic configuration, and after that we are going to do all our configurations only on my master. Assume that ASA1 is going to be my master. So once we do the basic configuration of the bootstrap configuration, the rest of the configuration happens only on ASA1, right? So the bootstrap configuration, how do you do the bootstrap configuration? So let's start with that. So the first step is basically configuring my cluster link, which is Ethernet 0. Like I said, right, this small link over here, that is my cluster link, and I'm doing a no shut on it. Okay, once I do that, what do I do next? I need to define my cluster interface mode, right? So this will do that. Cluster interface mode is spanned, right, and we are forcing it. Now the next part of cluster configuration is we need to define a cluster group. Okay, we are going to define a cluster group. Let's call it as CCI security v5, and we're going to define a name. I would say what the name of the unit. I'm going to call it as PRI, and the next part is basically where I define the cluster interface, right? The Ethernet 0, which is my the interface which I used, right? Cluster link, and I'm going to define IP address for that as well. Okay, the next part is priority. Okay, so I'm basically giving one particular device higher priority than the other, and the key part is basically used for encrypting the messages, but it's not compulsory, and enable no confirm, right? That will basically enable my group or cluster group, right, to work fluently. Now that's basically my bootstrap configuration on ASA1. On ASA2, it's going to be pretty much the same, little bit a small tweak, like this is going to remain same, only the IP address is going to change, right? Looks good. Yeah, so let's pick this up and put it on my ASAs now. So let's take this, and my ASA1 is here. Sorry, let's clear the screen a bit. Okay, so on this ASA, I'm going to put my bootstrap configuration for ASA1. Okay, meanwhile, let me copy the bootstrap configuration for ASA2 as well. So ASA1 looks good, and this is my ASA2. Maybe I will clear the screen a bit. So yeah, let's put the ASA2 bootstrap configuration. Great. Now we will have to wait for a few minutes until both the ASAs start to communicate with each other, and the clustering is enabled. Now you can see that the clustering has been enabled, and both the ASAs have found each other. You can see that on ASA 1, it has been transitioned to a master master, right? It has been given the master responsibility, whereas the ASA 2 is the slave, right? So we can check that. We can do a show command of show cluster info, right? And you can see that the PRI which we have configured is going to be my master, and the other one is going to be my slave. Great. So now what do you do? Right, so now once we have established the cluster, now you go back and do the configuration of my master, and my master is ASA1, right? So what configurations are we supposed to do? Okay, so we are basically using the span mode, which means we need to establish port channels, right? So we need to establish port channels on both the inside of the network and also the outside. So this is the inside of the ASA and this is the outside of the ASA. Both the side we need to have the port channel enabled, right? So let's start with that. So ASA1, so to start with, first let's go and do a so we want the port channels, right? So we want the port channels between the two ASAs. Obviously, if you look at this diagram, so this is one interface of the ASA and this is the other interface of the ASA, right? But when you do the configuration of the port channel on ASA, especially in a clustering environment, it's slightly different. So we just do it on ASA1, which is the master. We just take care of this interface, which is gigabit 1 interface and gigabit 0/3, this interface. So we just take care of these two interfaces, and the clustering port channel will make sure that it will form the port channel across both the ASAs. So let me show you how that happens. To start with, let's start with this interface Ethernet 1, which is my inside interface, this interface. Let's take that interface and put it in one particular port channel, right? So we're going to put it in channel group 10, right? And let's define the port channel corresponding to channel group 10, which is going to be this one. So how do you configure this interface port channel 10? We need to explicitly mention port channel span cluster, right? So that ASA understands what kind of a port channel we are talking about. The name of inside command still remains same, security level, which we have already done. You're putting an IP address over here, which is 10.11.11.10, right? So that you can ping later this interface, and you put a no channel, no shut. Now we do the same thing. You might have a doubt that, okay, we are actually configuring port channel but with just one single interface. Yes, it appears that way, but when because it's in a clustering environment, it will form port channels across the other ASAs which are of the same interfaces, like this, right? So let's do the same thing on the outside as well, right? So we start with we go here in Ethernet 3, right? And we have port channel of 20 configured here. Okay, so similarly, what we did earlier on 10, we are doing the same thing on 20. Now what do we do next? We are going to default, or we are going to put a default route, right, which will point to the outside, right? That's needed because we're gonna put that on ASA1 again. We're gonna put a default route saying any packet send it to R2. So that's a default route. Okay, and we can also put a NAT configuration as well, because we have an inside network here which is using 10.11.11 network, and in a traditional environment we would want to do that NAT, right? So that the outside of the network can reach to any part of the inside. So we're going to do a NAT as well, which we have done a lot of times before. We're going to define object network pool 1, right? Put in the IP addresses range which we're going to use, and we're going to tell that this network range is going to basically use that pool. Okay, so that's everything that basically goes in, right? So let's actually do this configuration. Let's pick this couple thing. So let me actually pick this up and put it on my, okay, so let's keep this here. Yeah, so let's put this on, this is my ASA1, right? So let's do this on ASA1. Okay, so that's done. Let's pick the port channel up now. Just go back once, and yeah, okay, now we are going to do the same thing for the outside interface, which is when I say Ethernet 3 here, it actually refers to gigabit 3, right? I'm going to put that as well. And what else? We're going to put this other port channel, It's good. And the default route followed by, okay, so let's put all of these together. Right, so the last part is this one. Looks good. Okay, let's probably clear the screen a bit. So we have done all of that. Let me check if all my port channels are up. So it is going to be show port channel summary probably. Yeah, so this is my port channel. Let's see on the switch side if everything looks good. Right, so let's go to the config mode. Oh, sorry, let's go out and let's check show ether channel probably. Sorry, it's going to be show ether channel summary if I'm not wrong. Okay, and show IP interface brief. Yeah, so all my both my port channels are up here, right? Both of them are up. On my ASA one as well, I could do that. Show interface IP brief. Okay, so one of the port channel is not up, which is port channel 20. Okay, let's check this again. It's 192.1.20.10. Did we do everything right? That basically includes the Ethernet 3, which is here. Let's see. Okay, are there any errors? No errors on R1 R2 side. Looks good. On the switch side as well, we have the port channels up, which means yeah, okay, now it's up. It just took a couple of minutes, to come up, right? So now it's up, which is good. So what do we do next to test this? Let's test it. How do we test it? Let's go to R1 and probably do a telnet to my R2, right? It should work, right? So what are we gonna do? We're gonna do telnet to 192.1.20.2. Okay, yeah, there you go, it worked, right? That's why I'm inside R2, right? So what did we actually do, right? If you have to summarize, we actually established this, right? So we got a port channel up here. We had two ASAs. We got the port channel up, and because you have the port channel, and we know that port channel does load balancing, and we finally did a telnet from R1 to R2, which means all of this was working, and the load, which is basically the traffic, is now shared between both the ASAs, depending on the intelligent port channel, right? And that's what we actually accomplished here, right, when we telnetted from R1 to R2. So yeah, that's basically the concept of clustering, especially the clustering mode, which is the span mode, right? In the next video, probably we'll take up the next mode of clustering, right? And we will take it from there. Thank you.